The comment was made in passing, which was almost the worst part. Not delivered in anger, not hurled across a room in the heat of an argument, just dropped into the middle of a Saturday afternoon the way you'd set down a cup you'd finished with. Casual, unrehearsed. My mother was standing at the kitchen island of the house I paid for, wearing the cardigan I'd ordered her from a catalog in November because she'd mentioned once, briefly, that she was always cold, and she looked at me across the granite countertop. Also paid for by me, selected from a showroom I'd driven her to on a Tuesday I'd cleared my calendar for, and she said, "Your father and I were talking, and honestly, Stella, your life is nothing to be proud of. The way you live, the choices you've made. We've never said it outright, but we think you should know. Don't show up to Claire's wedding. It would embarrass us." Claire was my cousin. The wedding was in 6 weeks. I had already purchased a gift. My father was at the kitchen table with his reading glasses on and the newspaper he liked, the print edition that I had set up a subscription for 18 months ago because he'd complained that digital gave him headaches. He did not look up. He did not disagree. He turned a page. I stood there for a moment. I was holding a bag of groceries I had stopped to pick up on the way over. Nothing extraordinary. Just the things my mother had texted me they were running low on. Olive oil and the specific brand of crackers my father liked, and a bar of dark chocolate for her, because she always wanted some after dinner, and I had been picking it up without being asked for so long it had become automatic. I set the bag on the counter. "Okay," I said. My mother blinked. She had expected, I think, some version of protest, tears, or argument, or the particular wounded scrambling of a person trying to defend their choices to people who have already decided the verdict. She had not expected okay. The word sat between us for a moment, unaccompanied. "Okay," I said again, and I picked up my keys and I left. I want to be careful here about the word bankrolling, because it implies a recklessness I did not possess and a dynamic I did not fully understand until I sat down, that same evening, and looked at the actual numbers. I had been supporting my parents for 6 years, not in the dramatic, all-at-once way of a sudden windfall, but in the gradual, incremental way that begins with one reasonable thing and accumulates, through a series of individually reasonable things, into something enormous. It had started when my father's back surgery left him unable to work for 8 months, and their savings, which had never been substantial, ran out faster than anyone had planned. I was 29, 2 years into running a small but profitable interior design consultancy, and I had money for the first time in my adult life and parents who needed help, and the decision to help had not felt like a decision so much as an inevitability. The 8 months became 12. The surgery had complications. My father recovered eventually, but the recovery redrew the shape of things in ways that proved permanent. He went back to work part-time and then not at all, which he framed as retirement and which I accepted as such because he was 61 and tired and I could manage it. My mother had not worked since I was in elementary school. This had always been the arrangement. What changed slowly was the texture of the help. It had begun as covering the gap, their mortgage shortfall, the utility bills that exceeded their fixed income, the medical costs that insurance left hanging. Over time, the gap widened. The mortgage on the house they lived in, the one my father had taken out in 2019 to refinance the original, at terms he had not fully read, was in arrears when I discovered it, and I had quietly assumed the payments rather than let them lose the house, because the alternative was my parents in a rental they couldn't afford or, worse, moving in with me, and I was not yet ready to examine what that reluctance said about us. I had also, in the preceding 2 years, replaced their aging furnace, paid for my mother's dental implants, covered the cost of a European river cruise they had mentioned wanting for a decade, renewed my father's car lease, paid for the granite countertops my mother had seen in a magazine and could not stop talking about, and set up a standing monthly transfer that I thought of as their household allowance, and that they thought of, I understood now, as their due. The total, when I added it up that Saturday evening at my own kitchen table with a glass of wine I had not finished, and my laptop open to a spreadsheet I was building for the first time despite the fact that the expenses had been accruing for 6 years, was not a number I will reproduce here. It was a number that, when I saw it assembled in a single column, made me sit very still for a long time. Your life is nothing to be proud of. I closed the spreadsheet. I opened it again. I looked at it for another 10 minutes. Then I began, methodically and without drama, to make a list. I am, by professional temperament, a person who understands systems. Interior design, at the level I practice it, is not about aesthetics, or not only. It is about understanding how a space functions, how its components relate to one another, what happens when you remove a single load-bearing element and the rest redistributes. I had built a business on this understanding. I applied it now to the architecture of my parents' financial life, which I had constructed almost entirely myself, and which they had, it turned out, come to inhabit with the complete unself-consciousness of people who have forgotten, or chosen to forget, that the walls around them were not original. The mortgage payment was on auto-pay from an account I controlled. I logged in and canceled the auto-pay. Not the mortgage itself. I was not interested in their losing the house, only in their understanding who had been preventing that outcome. I set a calendar reminder for 30 days, which was the outer limit of my willingness to let the lessons sit before I decided what came next. The monthly transfer, their household allowance, the standing order I had set up so long ago I had to scroll back through my transaction history to find the original setup date. I paused. Not canceled. Paused. The distinction mattered to me, though I suspected it would not matter to them in the immediate term. The newspaper subscription I simply canceled, because it was $9 a month, and it was in my name, and my father had not once, in 18 months, commented on receiving it. I canceled it the same way I would cancel any subscription I no longer used. The car lease was more complicated. Gerald's name was on it, but my card was the payment method on file. I called the leasing company on Monday morning, explained that I needed to update the payment information, and provided an alternative card, a prepaid one I had loaded with a zero balance, which would simply decline at the next billing cycle. This would give them approximately 3 weeks before the issue surfaced, enough time for everything else to have already landed. I did not call my parents. I did not send a message. I did not explain myself or issue a warning or give them the opportunity to reframe what they had said in softer terms. My mother had been clear. My father had turned a page. I was honoring the clarity. The only thing I wrote, in the Notes app on my phone, was a single line I composed, and then sat with for several minutes before deciding it was accurate. I gave them exactly what they asked for. My cousin Claire called me on a Wednesday, 9 days after the Saturday in the kitchen. She called because my mother had called her, to explain, apparently, that I would not be attending the wedding, that I had decided not to come, that this was my choice, and reflected my general attitude toward the family. Claire, who is 2 years older than me and has known my parents for 34 years, and has her own private inventory of their habits, listened to this account and then called me with the particular energy of a person who has just been told one version of a story and wants the geometry checked. I told her I would be delighted to come to her wedding. There was a pause. "Mom said you didn't want to come," Claire said. "Your mother was misinformed," I said. Another pause. "Stella, what's going on?" I thought about how to answer this. Claire deserved an honest answer, and she was also, as the bride, a person I had no interest in burdening with the specifics of a family financial reckoning 6 weeks before her wedding. I found a version of the truth that satisfied both requirements. "I had a conversation with my parents that clarified some things," I said. "I'm handling it. I'll be at your wedding, and I'll be happy to be there, and none of this is about you." "Okay," she said, in the tone of a person who knows they are not getting the full story and has decided, provisionally, to accept it. Is there something I should know?" "No," I said. "Go plan your wedding. I'll see you there." She laughed, a little uncertainly, and we talked for a few more minutes about the venue and the flowers and the thing her future mother-in-law had said about the centerpieces, and by the end of the call she sounded lighter, and I was glad. My mother called for the first time on day 11. I saw her name on the screen and I let it ring through. The voicemail she left was short and used the word confused 3 times, which told me that the mortgage autopay had surfaced and that she had not yet connected it to anything deliberate. She thought it was an error, a bank glitch. She asked me to call her back and sort it out. I did not call her back. She called again on day 13, and this time the voicemail was longer, and the word confused had been replaced by the word worried. The car payment had apparently declined. She did not yet know about the monthly transfer, which wouldn't be apparent until the end of the month, but she knew enough to know that 2 things had gone wrong in quick succession, and her voice carried the particular quality of a person standing at the edge of a realization they are not yet ready to step into. My father called on day 15. He had not called me independently in over 2 years. Communication had always been routed through my mother, which was itself a data point I had not examined until recently. His message was brief. He said, "Stella, your mother is upset. There seems to be some issue with the accounts. Give us a call when you get a chance." When you get a chance, as though I were busy, as though this were a scheduling matter. I did not call him either. The month-end transfer didn't process. My mother's message that evening was different from the previous ones, shorter, stripped of the confusion framing, carrying something beneath the words that I recognized as the sound of a person who has just understood the shape of what they are looking at. She did not ask me to fix it. She did not mention glitches or errors. She said my name, and then she said, "We need to talk." I agreed. I texted her back, the first contact I had initiated in 3 weeks, with 2 words, "I know." We met at a coffee shop, not at the house. This was my stipulation, offered without explanation, and she accepted it without asking for one, which told me she understood more than she was ready to say. She looked tired. My father had not come, whether because she'd asked him not to or because he had decided, in his characteristically passive way, that this was a conversation he could remain adjacent to rather than inside of. I didn't know and didn't ask. I let her speak first. She spoke for several minutes. She covered the mortgage, the car, the transfer, the newspaper. She had noticed the newspaper, which surprised me slightly, and she used words like frightening and sudden, and we didn't know this was happening. When she finished, she looked at me across the small table with its 2 ceramic mugs and its paper napkins, and she waited. I said, "You told me my life was nothing to be proud of. You told me not to show up to Claire's wedding because I would embarrass you. Dad didn't say anything." He turned a page. She opened her mouth. I continued. "I have been paying your mortgage for 4 years. I have been sending you money every month for 6. I paid for the countertops and the cruise and the furnace and the car and the dental work and the subscription he never mentioned and 40 other things I didn't keep a list of because I didn't think I needed to." I kept my voice level. This was not difficult. The level voice was not performance. It was simply where I was. "I did all of it because you're my parents and I was able to and I wanted to. I didn't do it to hold over you. I didn't do it to buy your approval." I paused. "But I did assume a basic floor. I assumed that the person funding your life was not also a source of embarrassment to you." My mother's eyes were wet. She did not let the tears fall, which I respected, because I would not have let them fall either. "Stella," she said, "what we said was—" "Unkind," I said. "It was unkind. And it was said in my presence in my house." I corrected myself. "In the house I pay for, wearing the cardigan I bought you, standing at the counter I paid for. That's what I keep coming back to, not the words by themselves, the location." She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know why I said it," she said finally. And then, after a pause, "That's not true. I think I resent things I'm not supposed to resent. The way things turned out, the way we need you, and I took it out on you and that was wrong." It was the most honest thing she had said to me in years, possibly ever. I picked up my coffee. I drank some of it. Outside the window, the street was doing its ordinary things. A woman with a stroller, a delivery cyclist, 2 men talking on a corner with the unhurried posture of people who have nowhere to be. "I'm not cutting you off," I said. "I want to be clear about that. I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm doing this because you told me my choices were nothing to be proud of, and I think you should spend some time understanding what those choices have been covering." I set the mug down. "When you understand that, When both of you understand that, we can talk about what comes next." She nodded, very slightly, the nod of a person receiving a verdict they had partially written themselves. We stayed for another 20 minutes. We did not resolve anything. We were not supposed to. Some things require time to settle, the way silt settles in water that has been disturbed. You cannot rush the clearing, you can only wait for stillness to do its work. I paid for the coffee. Out of habit, or principle, or some combination of the two that I had not yet finished untangling. Outside, I walked to my car in the thin autumn light, unhurried. I had a client meeting in 2 hours, a project I was excited about, a young couple's first home, all original details and good bones, and a floor plan that needed only small, careful changes to become exactly what it wanted to be. I had built a life that was entirely my own. I had built it with my own hands, my own money, my own methodical and unglamorous and deeply satisfying labor. It had no audience. It had not been performed for anyone's approval. It had simply been constructed, day by day, out of the same materials available to anyone who decides, at some point, that their own assessment of their own life is the one that counts. My mother had called it nothing to be proud of. She had said it standing inside the evidence that she was wrong. I got in the car. I had work to do, and I was good at it, and the afternoon was clear, and that was sufficient. That was more than sufficient.